Okay, we're continuing our series on theology proper. So, John 10, please. I was doing my series on the Jewish background of the Bible, which is a 13-part PowerPoint series, yesterday at another place. And I mentioned we got to know the cultures, languages, original audiences of the people that the Bible was written to. And when it was written for everybody, but these books were written to very specific people or groups of people. And of course, we need to know the history that they knew. So, one of these things I had to look up. Verily, verily, I say unto you, he that entereth not by the door into the sheepfold, but climbeth up some other way, the same is a thief and a robber. But he that entereth in by the door is the shepherd of the sheep. To him the porter openeth, and the sheep hear his voice, and he calleth his own sheep by name, and leadeth them out. And when he putteth forth his own sheep, he goeth before them, and the sheep follow him, for they know his voice. And a stranger will they not follow, but will flee from him, for they know not the voice of strangers. This parable spake Jesus unto them, but they understood not what things they were which he spake unto them. Then said Jesus unto them again, Verily, verily, I say unto you, I am the door of the sheep. Now, some stuff I copied from the internet, because most of us don't grow up in agriculture these days. Of all domesticated animals, sheep are the most helpless. Sheep will spend their entire day grazing, wandering from place to place, never looking up. As a result, they often become lost. But sheep have no homing instinct as other animals do. They are totally incapable of finding their way to their sheepfold even when it is in plain sight. By nature, sheep are followers. If the lead sheep steps off a cliff, the others will follow. Additionally, by the way, I saw animals sometimes will follow people. It was some guy jogging or something, and I saw this online. A bunch of sheep following him. I've actually jogged and had, of course, dogs will follow you. 2 goats in Alaska. I had to return them home before they got shot for stealing livestock. Additionally, sheep are easily susceptible to injuries and are utterly helpless against predators. If a wolf enters the pen, they won't defend themselves. They won't try to run away or spread out. Instead, they huddle together and are easily slaughtered. If sheep fall into moving water, they will drown. However, sheep do fear moving water and will not drink from any stream or lake unless the water is perfectly still. This is why David in the 23rd Psalm tells us of the shepherd who makes us to lie down in green pastures. He leads us beside the still waters. Though we walk through the valley, the shadow of death, we will fear no evil. For you, the shepherd, are with us. Some of this is in brackets, the us and we. Even the shepherd. But that's, of course, what it's talking about. Sheep are totally dependent upon the shepherd who tends them with care and compassion. Shepherds were the providers, guides, protectors, and constant companions of sheep. So close was the bond between shepherd and sheep that to this day, Middle Eastern shepherds can divide flocks that have mingled at a well or during the night simply by calling their sheep, who know and follow their shepherd's voice. Shepherds were inseparable from their flocks. The shepherd would lead the sheep to safe places to graze and make them lie down for several hours in a shady place. Then, as night fell, the shepherd would lead the sheep to the protection of the sheepfold. There were 2 kinds of sheepfolds or pens. One kind was a public sheepfold found in the cities and villages. It would be large enough to hold several flocks of sheep. This sheep pen would be in the care of a porter or doorkeeper, whose duty it was to guard the door to the sheep pen during the night and to admit the shepherds in the morning. The shepherds would call their sheep, each of which knew its own shepherd's voice, and would lead them out to pasture. The second kind of sheep pen was in the countryside, where the shepherds would keep their flocks in good weather. This type of sheep pen was nothing more than a rough circle of rocks piled into a wall with a small open space to enter. Through it the shepherd would drive the sheep at nightfall. Since there was no gate to close, just an opening, the shepherd would keep the sheep and wild animals out by lying across the opening. He would sleep there, in this case literally becoming the door of the sheep. Okay, now, sheep versus wolves. Wolves are bad guys in the Bible. Doesn't mean they can't be good pets. They're very intelligent. In Alaska especially, they'll have wolf dogs. And it's interesting up there because wolves are very scared of people. Dogs are not. Wolf dogs can be quite dangerous because they can be sort of wild. And at the same time, they've lost their fear of people. Anyway, North American wolves have certainly been studied. In Israel now, I mean, the wolves and the bears are all gone. It's not lions and tigers and bears in the Old Testament, it's lions and bears, not tigers. But here's what they've noticed because now they put tracking devices on them, they run around and film them. Here's the thing. Wolves are intelligent and very structured in their pack. There is an alpha male and an alpha female. You might even hear that used for people. Some guy who's at the top of an organization. I can think of Martha Stewart as being called an alpha female because of her business. And the alpha male and the alpha female either do the breeding, or according to one person that I talked to about this, at least decide who does the breeding. And after a kill, and this has been well filmed, the alpha wolves eat first. At the bottom of the pack is an omega wolf. They pick on the omega wolf. The omega wolf can't eat till the other wolves have eaten after a kill. If the omega wolf tries to get in, I've seen this on film, they try to chase it away. It's a terrible position to be in. If the omega wolf dies, another wolf has to take its place for the health of the pack. Wolves need this hierarchy, including the omega wolf, for whatever reason. We're sheep. We are not wolves. We're not supposed to have alphas on top and omegas to let our frustrations out on the bottom. Let's just say sometimes, and I don't mean this church, sometimes we develop a wolf pack mentality. Now, I guess gangs can get like that. Churches can get like that. But we're not supposed to be. Here, though, it's talking about wolves as a danger to sheep because they eat sheep, where sheep simply eat grass. The sixth feast in John has 7 feasts. The sixth feast is dedication, which is coming up soon. Now, as I continue on, I just want to see exactly where I left off. John 7. John 10 rather, verse 7, verse 8. Okay. All that ever came. Okay. Then Jesus said unto them again, Verily, verily, I say unto you, I am the door of the sheep. We know that. All that ever came before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not hear them. I am the door. The sheep didn't hear them. Maybe some other people did. Jesus wasn't the only person running around calling himself a Messiah back in those days. The Romans were in control. The Jews kept revolting. I am the door. That's one of the 7 I am statements. By me, if any man enter in, he shall be saved, and shall go in and out and find pasture. The thief cometh not, but for to steal and to kill and to destroy. I am come that they might have life, and that they might have it more abundantly. Here's another I am statement. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd giveth his life for the sheep. Now, here's some economics. But he that is an hireling, and not the shepherd, whose own the sheep are not, seeth the wolf coming, and leaveth the sheep, and fleeth, and the wolf catcheth them, and scattereth the sheep. Business ownership can be very difficult. But if you own something, you really care about it. You're going to do anything to make sure it succeeds. When you're a hireling, when things get tough, you can quit your job, you can run. After all, you're just there for the money. The hireling fleeth, because he is an hireling, and careth not for the sheep. He is there for the money. I am the good shepherd, and know my sheep, and am known of mine. As the Father knoweth me, even so know I the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. And other sheep I have, which are not of this fold. Them also I must bring, and they shall hear my voice, and there shall be one fold and one shepherd. Therefore doth my Father love me, because I lay down my life, that I might take it again. No man taketh it from me, but I lay it down of myself. I have power to lay it down, and I have power to take it again. This commandment have I received of my Father. Remember, this is theology proper. He got this commandment from his Father. There was a division, therefore, again among the Jews for these sayings, as there was time and time again. And many of them said, He hath a devil and is mad. Why hear ye him? Others said, These are not the words of him that hath a devil. Can a devil open the eyes of the blind? Now, verse 22, and it was Jerusalem, the feast of the dedication, and it was winter. Again, that is the sixth feast. It was winter. Any Jew would know that. But John's writing to a whole lot of Gentiles. Some Jews too, I'm sure. So he had to explain that. Feast of Dedication is also called the Festival of the Lights. It's also called Hanukkah. Like the Jewish Christmas, basically, is what it's turned into. And it commemorates when the Maccabees cleansed the temple after the abomination of desolation set up by Antiochus IV Epiphanes. Later, they were able to get control of the whole country and kick out the Syrian Seleucids. And that was about 200 years before Jesus. So you can imagine the fervor the people had. Hey, let's do it again. It worked 200 years ago, like the American Revolution. Let's do it again. And so here comes a guy talking about sin instead of revolt against Rome. They didn't know what to do with him. And Jesus walked in the temple in Solomon's porch. Then came the Jews round about him. By the way, let's look at what this is like. You've got this magnificent temple. Herod had helped really get a building project going to really make it better than probably it had ever been, even under Solomon's time. And it's winter, that's the rainy season in Israel. Now, it's not monsoon type rains. Maybe, who knows what it was like back then. Modern Israel, it hardly rains during this summer. I was there one summer, I think it rained twice. We heard thunder once, and it doesn't rain much, or basically not at all, very little. Winter, it rains, and the Jezreel Valley gets so muddy. Again, that's why, it's the time when kings go forth to battle, right? When David's about to commit a sin with Bathsheba. I mean, you go out in after dry season. You don't go out in the wet season. And the Jezreel Valley, you walk around, and if you're working out in the fields or something, your boots come off in the mud. It's terrible. And then you bring the mud in. When I was at Kibbutz Elanim, you bring the mud in the cafe. Actually, no, Elanim. It wasn't Elanim. That was the summertime. Kibbutz Givat Dozer, I was before that. Years before that, I was there over the winter, and you walk in and the mud just gets, we used to eat in the common cafeteria. The kibbutz is getting away from that, these agricultural collectives. But back in those days, you ate in the common cafeteria, you dragged in mud. And it was just everywhere. I mean, it got in your bathroom, you name it. In the cafeteria, what they do is, instead of just taking mops, back in those days anyway, they take hoses and just spray everything down, and then they go with these big, makel gumi, what do you call that in English? Squeegee. These squeegees that are like, 8 feet long or something. And you'd have these teenagers cleaning, and you'd have a drain system basically indoors around the in the cafeteria, and put everything into the drain, just mud everywhere. So you can imagine that, in 1 Kings 18, when Elijah has his battle against the prophets of Baal, and he tells Ahab, hey, get going, it's going to rain. Because you've got to get going before the rain bogs you down. And Jesus, so this is the time of year it is. Then came the Jews round about him and said unto him, how long dost thou make us to doubt? If thou be the Christ, tell us plainly. Jesus answered them, I told you, and ye believe not. The works that I do in my Father's name, they bear witness of me. But ye believe not. Because ye are not of my sheep, as I said unto you. My sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. And I give unto them eternal life, and they shall never perish, neither shall any man, it says in King James English, in italics, to help us understand. You could just say, neither shall any pluck them out of my hand. So the assumption is that it means any man, and so they put man in italics. Maybe it's not just any man, maybe not anything at all. Any, angels, principalities, powers, whatever. My Father which gave them me is greater than all, and no man is able to pluck them out of my Father's hand. I and my Father are one. Okay? Then the Jews took up stones again to stone him. Jesus answered them, many good works have I showed you from my Father. For which of those works do ye stone me? The Jews answered him, saying, for a good work we stone thee not, but for blasphemy. They knew what he was claiming. And because thou, being a man, makest thyself God. Okay, he said, I and my Father are one. The unsaved understood his claim. Don't ever let some culty or anybody else tell you Jesus didn't claim to be God. The unsaved understood his claims time and time again in the book of John. Jesus answered them, is it not written in your law, I said ye are gods? If he called them gods, unto whom the word of God came, and the scripture cannot be broken, say ye of him whom the Father has sanctified and sent into the world, thou blasphemest, because I said I am the Son of God. This is one tough passage. Mormons use it to show that they're good, their belief is we're going to be gods someday. This comes right out of the Garden of Eden. You shall be gods. And I guess God was a man like us, and they talk about planets. It's kind of a Star Trek religion. Anyway, he'll once again point to all the ways in which he fulfills the role of Messiah. If gods is an appropriate description from God himself to those who are enabled to perform his will, then how can they stone Jesus, who has performed actual miracles, for blasphemy by claiming to be the Son of God? Psalm 82:6. That's what Jesus was quoting. Ye are gods. In this psalm, God is most likely addressing human rulers whom he has endowed with authority, such as you see in Romans 13, to render just judgments and govern in his name. Sometimes it's called the Psalm of the Judges. The human rulers fail to do so in a way that honored God, and Psalm 82 is his judgment on them. Jesus uses the verse to make a connection. If human rulers not begotten by the Holy Spirit are called gods by the Father in that psalm, then Jesus has every right to call himself the Son of God, considering his claim to the title is greater than the human authorities. This is not easy. It is because we think it just in a different way, and Jesus actually had to explain things to them. The idea is to think biblically. John 10:37. If I do not the works of my Father, believe me not. But if I do, though ye believe me not, believe the works, that ye may know and believe that the Father is in me and I in him. That's claim to deity again. Therefore they sought again to take him, but he escaped out of their hand. And they went again beyond Jordan into the place where John had first baptized, and there he abode. And many resorted unto him, and said, John did no miracle, but all things that John spake of this man were true. And many believed on him there. Now, any questions so far as we finish that chapter? John 11. Now a certain man was sick, named Lazarus, of Bethany, the town, and this was not far off from Jerusalem, the town of Mary and her sister Martha. It was that Mary which anointed the Lord. By the way, Mary's a common name back then. It was Miriam, like Moses' sister in Hebrew. It was that Mary which anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was sick. Lazarus coming from the Greek version of Eleazar, which you happen to see in the Old Testament. And, by the way, in the Apocrypha. I think, yeah. But, therefore his sister sent unto him, saying, Lord, behold, he whom thou lovest is sick. When Jesus heard that, he said, This sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God, that the Son of God might be glorified therein. Now, remember, Lazarus lives in Bethany. It's very close to Jerusalem, and they've got hostile religious leaders there who want Jesus dead. You see that in John 5:18, 10:39, and you're going to see it again in John 11:8. Now, Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. When he had heard, therefore, that he was sick, he abode 2 days in the same place where he was. That seems illogical. If a guy's sick, you go to him right away. But he wanted Lazarus to die. Then after that, saith he to his disciples, Let us go into Judea again. Remember, that's in the south. That includes Jerusalem. Up the north is Galilee, and other areas like Perea. His disciples say unto him, Master, the Jews of late sought to stone thee, and that goest thou thither again? Jesus answered, Are there not 12 hours in the day? By the way, are there? Can you guys answer? 2 days a year, there were 12 hours in the day. Spring equinox and fall equinox. So why does Jesus say that if it's only true for 2 days out of the year? Because in the average, there are 12. It averages out that way anywhere on the planet. Even the North and South poles, where you get like 6 months of light, 6 months a day. On the average, it's still 12 hours. If any man walk in the day, he stumbleth not, because he seeth the light of this world. See, this is the days before all these street lights. But if a man walk in the night, he stumbleth, because there is no light in him. These things said he. Anyone ever been out in the woods in a camping trip and it's night and maybe there's no moon or it's cloudy? You know what it's like. Without that flashlight, you can't even find your way back to your tent. But if a man walk in the night, he stumbleth, because there is no light in him. These things said he. And after that he saith unto them, Our friend Lazarus sleepeth, but I go that I may awake him out of sleep. Then said his disciples, Lord, if he sleep well, he shall do well. They think he's just taking a nap or a night's sleep, whatever. Howbeit Jesus spake of his death, but they thought he had spoken of taking rest and sleep. By the way, death is often called sleep in the Bible. It doesn't mean there's soul sleep. What happens when I go to sleep at night? I expect to wake up in the morning. Same with the resurrection. When we sleep, we will be resurrected someday. Then said Jesus unto them plainly, Lazarus is dead, and I am glad for your sakes that I was not there. See, he held off, to the intent that ye may believe. Nevertheless, let us go unto him. Then said Thomas, which is called Didymus, the one they call Doubting Thomas, unto his fellow disciples, Let us also go, that we may die with him. Then when Jesus came, he found that he had lain in the grave 4 days already. Many Jewish people considered the fourth day to be when the soul was considered truly gone. So he waits that long, so everyone would know, even according to their own custom, his soul's gone. Now Bethany was nigh to Jerusalem, about 15 furlongs off, which really makes no sense to us Americans, but that's about 2 miles. And many of the Jews came to Martha and Mary to comfort them concerning their brother. Then Martha, as soon as she heard that Jesus was coming, went and met him, but Mary sat still in the house. Martha's sort of the more animated of the two, maybe the more worried of the two. Then said Martha unto Jesus, Lord, if thou hadst been here, my brother had not died. That's great, blame him. But I know that even now, whatsoever thou wilt ask of God, God will give it thee. So there's still hope. Jesus said unto her, Thy brother shall rise again. Martha said unto him, I know that he shall rise again in the resurrection at the last day. That's pretty good. She believed in the resurrection. The Sadducees did not. Jesus said unto her, I am the resurrection and the life. He that believeth in me, though he were dead, yet shall he live. And whosoever liveth and believeth in me shall never die. Believest thou this? Now, are we right to say this is not a picture of salvation? It's a picture of the resurrection. Now that's certainly debatable. Not all circles believe that. We read it maybe, oh yeah, I believe in Jesus. Even though I physically die, I'm going to live again, which is true. And whosoever liveth and believeth in me shall never die. Okay? I'm alive. I believe in Jesus, so I never die spiritually. Well, that may be true. The context here is physical. Believest thou this? And you have to think of this. Whosoever liveth and believeth in me. It could be saying, like when he comes back, if you're alive, when Jesus comes back, you're never going to die. But a lot of people just say, that's salvation. You live, you believe in him, you're never going to die spiritually. It could be both. It could be one, it could be the other, or it could be both. And the reason is, he's going to do something which is going to give birth to really a false doctrine. She saith unto him, Yea, Lord, I believe that thou art the Christ, the Son of God, which shall come into the world. And no wonder he loved her. I mean, they believed in her. They believed in him. And when she had so said, she went her way and called Mary her sister secretly, saying, The Master is come and calleth for thee. As soon as she heard that, she arose quickly and came unto him. Now Jesus was not yet come into the town, but was in that place where Martha met him. The Jews which were with her in the house and comforted her, when they saw Mary, that she rose up hastily and went out. See, she was told secretly. Her sister didn't want everyone else to know about this, saying, She goeth unto the grave to weep there. Then when Mary was come where Jesus was, and saw him, she fell down at his feet, saying unto him what her sister said, Lord, if thou hadst been here, my brother had not died. When Jesus therefore saw her weeping, and the Jews also weeping which came with her, he groaned in the spirit and was troubled. And he said, by the way, I heard once that they would actually hire professional mourners or something, or hire people to mourn with you. Now, there is a custom in Judaism that when someone dies, you sit Shiva. In other words, you go to the house of the dead person, sit, this is how they do it these days, you sit on stools for 7 days. I don't think you shave. There's a lot that you deny yourself, and you help comfort the person. It's called sitting Shiva. If you see that movie that just came out, The Fablemans, a guy sitting Shiva, and if you don't understand that, you don't understand. Well, he doesn't want to sleep in a bed. He wants to sleep on the floor because he's sitting Shiva for his mother. Now, the exact customs back then, you usually have to look in the Talmud or in Josephus or something to see exactly how they're doing things. But there could have been some people who, they're trying to comfort her. When Jesus therefore saw her weeping, and the Jews also weeping which came with her, he groaned in the spirit and was troubled. Now we can try to imagine why. They don't believe, they don't know what's going on, they don't know what, Lazarus is now. And death is a tough thing. And he said, Where have ye laid him? As if he didn't know. They said unto him, Lord, come and see. In the shortest verse in all the Bible, if you ever have to memorize a Bible verse, here's the one. Jesus wept. Then said the Jews, Behold how he loved him. Now, okay. And some of them said, Could not this man, which opened the eyes of the blind, have caused that even this man should not have died? And you've got to accuse Jesus of anything that doesn't go your way. Jesus, therefore, again groaning in himself, cometh to the grave. It was a cave, and a stone lay upon it. We tend to dig earth, put someone in, but here he had a cave with a stone. Could have implied that guy that family had some means, enough money to be able to do that. Jesus said, "Take ye away the stone." Martha, the sister of him that was dead, saith unto him, Lord, by this time he stinketh, for he hath been dead 4 days. Okay, you do tend to stink when you die, including animals, by the way, if you ever see roadkill or anything. Jesus saith unto her, Said I not unto thee that if thou wouldest believe it, thou shouldest see the glory of God? Then they took away the stone from the place where the dead was laid. And Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, Father, I thank thee that thou hast heard me. And I knew that thou hearest me always. But because of the people which stand by, I said it, that they may believe that thou hast sent me. That's the biggest, it's one of the biggest things in the book of John. The Father sent Jesus. Time and time again that comes up. And when he had thus spoken, he cried with a loud voice, Lazarus, come forth. And he that was dead came forth, bound hand and foot with grave clothes, and his face was bound about with a napkin. Remember Jesus, after the resurrection, they found, grave clothes and a napkin separately. Jesus said unto them, Loose him and let him go. Now, this is the 7th of the 7 signs indicated by the Gospel of John. Again, you got to think, is this a picture of the resurrection, or is it the picture of the new birth? The reason it might get a little more important is because some people believe that you have nothing whatsoever to do with the new birth. In other words, God's going to do it with or without your permission. That was due to Augustine bringing Manichaean Gnosticism into the church. Today it's called Calvinism. When I give my testimony to Calvinists, they melt down. They can't handle it. They can't handle how I got saved. They can't handle the fact that I did make a conscious, logical, calculated, analytical decision for the gospel while in my unregenerate state as God was opening my eyes and opening my heart. Do enough evangelism, you're going to see people do what Calvinists say you can't do, which is reject the gospel. There was some excuse. Well, they weren't ready. God wasn't calling them. No. You have fallen for a false teaching. Granted, there's a lot in the Bible about God's sovereignty. Predestination, by the way, as it appears in Ephesians, it never says we're predestinated to be saved. When I got saved that night, early in the morning, in my dorm room at the University of Massachusetts Amherst at the tail end of spring break, in 1975, I jumped onto the predestination train. That train's got everyone that's saved on it. That's when I got on. In a sense, or I could say it's a personal train. Things are going to happen in my life, and things are going to happen after my death. I will go to heaven. I will be resurrected. I will be out of the presence of sin, and I will be reign with Jesus forever. That's predestination. It never says a person is predestinated to be saved. And we'll look at this. Well, Lazarus had no choice whatsoever in the matter. Maybe it's not talking about the new birth here. Maybe it's talking about physical resurrection. Everyone's going to get resurrected. Daniel 12:2 mentions it. It comes again and again in the New Testament. We're going to get resurrected whether we like it or not, saved or unsaved. That's what this is showing, is the physical resurrection. There might be something to do with the new birth here. But it actually, when you compare the two, the physical resurrection seems an awful lot more likely, unless someone has Calvinized you. I've had these arguments with people. I tell them my testimony, they tell me why I'm wrong. So it gets personal fast. It's really arrogant to tell a person that, that's not how you got saved, here's how you got saved, like they were there. But it's the doctrine that what's bad about it is it's keeping people from evangelism, number one. Number two, it's really interesting. The Pharisees believed in God's sovereignty to an extent where God was like in control of everything, like there was no free will almost. The Sadducees did not. Who gave Jesus the fits? The Pharisees. Now, the Sadducees were so far from God anyway, because they didn't even believe a lot of They didn't believe the resurrection. They didn't believe angel spirit. They were liberals. But the thing is, I have been member of, Calvinist type churches, Lutheran Church, Calvinist. I've certainly gone, PCA, Presbyterian Church of America. There are a lot of great people in those churches, but when you really start arguing theology with Calvinists, which has happened to me too many times, it gets very Pharisaical. But see, they've got the same viewpoint as the Pharisees. God is in complete control, and you better keep every letter of the law. I'll tell you, they are very legalistic churches. They can talk all about how it's God that does this and God does that, and we're not under the law. My wife and I could tell you things that have happened to us visiting Calvinistic churches you wouldn't believe. It's that same spirit. When you take God's sovereignty to a ridiculous extreme, and then at the same time become extremely legalistic. Okay, those are often are either legalistic or at least kind of joyless churches. And it's not everybody. It's not that they're all bad. Everybody in the pew is bad. It's that the theology lends itself, for some reason, towards Phariseeism, but the Pharisees had somewhat of that same belief, God's sovereignty to an extreme, where they make comments. You see these things, I get on Facebook, right, the ultimate source of all truth in the universe, and they'll quote John MacArthur, and they'll quote R.C. Sproul, and I'm thinking, that's not my God. That is not my God. This, I believe, points to the resurrection. It is not really a picture of the new birth. There might be something about the new birth, whosoever liveth and believeth in thee shall never die. Maybe that's the new birth, maybe it's not. But the whole thing really tends to point towards the resurrection. Now, we left off at, Verse 45, then many of the Jews which came to Mary and had seen the things which Jesus did believed on him. But some of them went their ways to the Pharisees and told them what things Jesus had done. Then gathered the chief priests and the Pharisees a council and said, what do we? For this man doeth many miracles. If we let him thus alone, all men will believe on him, and the Romans shall come and take away both our place and our nation. Okay, the Pharisees were the party of the synagogue, the tradesman, the common man. The chief priests were probably Sadducees. They were the aristocratic class, had more money, and were real sellouts to the Romans. The Roman government, by that point, was saying, you're a high priest, now you're not high priest. They put Annas in, they took him out. And they're the ones who decided. Now, that wasn't the law of Moses, but the Romans were in control, and that's what had happened. So you had to be a sellout to really get into their party, in a sense. And that was their real fear. It's the Romans. The Romans were just, they crucified 2,000 Jews after a particular revolt. They were brutal. You do see centurions that seem to get along with the Jews. But when you have an occupying army, that sometimes happens. You do have people that actually have friends in the local population and will even do something for them. You see in the Gospels, centurion, he loveth our nation and has built us a synagogue. We see in Acts, the centurion, that gets saved. But generally, they didn't like the Romans. And one of them named Caiaphas, being the high priest that same year. Again, high priest, the Romans had to put you in by that time. Said unto them, ye know nothing at all. By the way, his father-in-law was Annas, not Ananias, whom we meet later, but Annas, who had been a high priest at one time. The Romans put him in, the Romans took him out. Nor consider that it is expedient for us that one man should die for the people, and that the whole nation perish not. And this spake he not of himself, but being high priest that year, he prophesied that Jesus should die for that nation. Here's a guy, doesn't believe in Jesus, is unsaved, and he's prophesying. Now does Matthew 7 make a little more sense? Not all those to say to me, Lord, Lord, shall enter heaven. People say we've prophesied, we've done this. Yeah, they might have really prophesied. It doesn't mean you're saved. Judas was given the authority to perform miracles. He was never saved. And not for that nation only, but that also he should gather together in one the children of God that were scattered abroad. Remember, now, of course, the children of God being the children of Israel, most Jews lived outside of Israel at this point. A whole bunch in Alexandria, Egypt, Rome, all over the place. But then again, you could also say, children of God being any children of God, including born-again Christians. We will be gathered together at one time. Then from that day forth they took counsel together for to put him to death. It's like they can't believe in him. They got to try to execute him because they're so scared of the Romans. It is amazing what governmental fear can do to people. When communism came into places like Russia and China, well, read anything Richard Rembrandt wrote, or his wife Sabina Rembrandt. They were both Jewish converts to Christianity. Richard Rembrandt did 2 prison sentences. He was in Romania. He was ordained an Anglican, then a Lutheran, and I actually heard him speak in 1980. He's long gone. But he did 2 prison sentences that totaled 14 years. I think 2 years under solitary confinement, medieval tortures. Christians ransomed them out. She actually did some prison time too. I think it was 2 years. And might have been like a work camp, I think. And he came, and I saw this on black and white. He took his shirt off in front of Congress, showed all the scars. Look, this is communism. He was under medieval tortures. I remember when he spoke, he didn't stand. I mean, he could walk. He'd take his shoes all in black, with a little white thing here, decked out in black. Lutheran clergy, clerical wear. And he sits in his seat, and his feet, he takes his shoes off, and his feet are up in a sleeping bag. His feet were often in pain. He mentions at some point they actually had beaten his feet. But when he talks about, people selling their parents out or whatever, China, Watchmeni with all those churches and had all those books, mainly written by his students. He wrote, I don't know how many, 1, 2, 3 of them. But, the communists come in and things just fold up. It's incredibly oppressive. People can sell out. They are scared of the Romans. Jesus, verse 54. Jesus therefore walked no more openly among the Jews, but went thence unto a country near to the wilderness, into a city called Ephraim, and there continued with his disciples. And the Jews' Passover was nigh at hand. This is the 3rd Passover in John and the 7th feast in John. And many went out of the country to Jerusalem before the Passover to purify themselves. Then sought they for Jesus, and spake among themselves as they stood in the temple, What think ye, that he will not come to the feast? Now both the chief priests and the Pharisees had given a commandment that if any man knew where he was, he should show it, that they might take him. So already trying to get to him. Okay, that is 10:37. I will finish there. And Father, we do ask for safety this week, for a good week for all of us, for healing, for Dave's wife, and just anyone else that might need it. In Jesus' name, amen.